Hey moms, are you finding it challenging to motivate your teen, whether they're glued to their phones, lost in video games, or just binge watching TV shows? Well, I have a fantastic resource that can help. Dr. Melanie McNally is a clinical psychologist and brain coach and has created a free motivational cheat sheet designed specifically for parents like you. This guide breaks down the three key components of motivation, helps you identify where your teens might be struggling, and offers actionable steps to reignite their drive. And it's absolutely free. So grab your free copy by clicking on the link in the show notes and going to destinationu.net/motivate and fill out the form for instant access. Empower yourself with the tools to support your teen's journey towards a more motivated and engaged life. So grab the link in the show notes and go to destinationu.net/motivate and start empowering yourself today. Welcome to the Real Life Momz podcast. It is time to take a break from all our to-dos and carve out this time to focus on yourself. I'm Lisa Foster, your host, and today I'm here with fellow mom and fellow podcaster, Lydia Gillman. And we are discussing the topic of living as a highly sensitive person. So hi, Lydia. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lisa. It's so great to be here with you.
I always love talking to you. You're across the world. We met through podcasting, and this is just amazing that we can always connect like this.
Yes, I love it. And you've been on my podcast, Step Into Purpose, twice, and you've been always the top ranking guest. So yeah, it's so nice to be on your podcast.
Oh my gosh, I'm so honored. Well, I have wanted you on my podcast forever, so I'm so glad you're here because you have been living the life of a highly sensitive person. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't even know what that is. And I think it could be really something that when you learn, you could be like, oh, maybe that is me. And that maybe explains a lot about how I've been feeling. So I think this is such an important topic. So maybe you could
Yeah.
just start with like telling us what's your definition of being a highly sensitive person?
Yes. Well, I think a lot of people don't know about highly sensitive people, or they might have heard the term and they're not quite sure. It was only about 2 years ago that I really discovered that I was, and I was interviewing someone who works a lot with highly sensitive people. And then I'm like, hang on a second. The more I learned about it, the more I was like, well, actually, I'm sure that's me. And I totally am a highly sensitive person. And there is a test that you can do, actually. The clinical psychologist who actually coined the term way back in probably the mid 90s, I think, the mid 1990s. So I was only about 20 and when the term was actually coined. So I grew up as a highly sensitive person and had no idea. I mean, the term didn't even exist yet. And when I did the test, I realized, well, it's not just me. Also, my husband is a highly sensitive person, both my children, and also my dad. It's not something we really think about. And often we think there's something wrong with us because we do experience the world quite differently. It's not a diagnosis, like it's not something that you can go to the doctor and be diagnosed from a brain scan or something. It's more a personality trait, but it's very real. And we do have our nervous systems are biologically quite different, apparently. So the way it shows up mainly is, especially with children, they're very overwhelmed by sensory input, loud noises, strong smells, even like if you have a scratchy sweater or a label at the back of your sweater. Highly sensitive people don't really cope very well with those sort of things. I felt so validated once I learned about highly sensitive people. It's like, this is why I'm not so different. I'm not crazy. I just have this trait. And that made a huge difference for me. So I think validation is huge.
Yeah. So what were some of the things you said that like you had somebody come on and they were talking about it and you're like, yep,
Yes.
that's me. Yep, that's me. What were
Yeah.
some of those things that you were kind of checking off that made you feel like, oh my God, this is me. I need to get tested?
I think it was just the oversensitivity to external stimuli, but also the internal sensitivity, because highly sensitive people are often hugely empathetic and they feel others' emotions. Like
Mm.
you'll walk into a room and you'll sort of absorb everyone else's emotions and then really be trying to play into the situation so that you're fitting into the situation in terms of emotions and things. And yeah, that was definitely me. And feel sort of compassion sometimes to a point where it actually feels painful at times. Like if you really put your mind in there, it can feel quite painful. So especially if you have a child like that, so often we do tell children in society, oh, toughen up, come on, you'll be all right, come on, and push them into things. But sometimes there is just a little bit of shyness or something. But if they are actually highly sensitive, there's a very good reason. And they, inside, they're feeling so much more than you can ever imagine. Just
Mhm.
all the sensory stimuli is coming in at them, and also the emotional side as well. And that's probably the side which really I understood, was that intense emotional, like
Yeah.
just really sucking up other people's emotions. I did that a lot as a child. Yeah.
Because I think about there's like sensory processing out there, right?
Yes.
Where some kids, the sensory stimulation can be overwhelming. But this
Yeah.
also this sounds a little different because it seems like there's an emotional piece. Like I think of
Yeah.
sometimes people that I meet that are highly sensitive, that they're almost like these little sponges, right? Like go in, like
Yes.
you said, they
Yes.
go into a room or they're listening to a friend that was telling them a story, and all of a sudden it becomes like so ingrained in their bodies and
Yes.
their
Yes.
emotions that like they have a hard time, right, like separating from that. Is that,
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm sensitive, but I don't think I'm highly sensitive,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So, but does that sound like something you were kind of going through a little bit, or?
I think as a child, definitely, and it's really something you have to learn as we get older to set strong boundaries, and that is really important for anyone, but especially if you are highly sensitive, to set strong boundaries and realize what's your emotions and what isn't your emotions to take on. And yeah, like I say, as a child, that's very difficult. I mean, I would absorb my parents' emotions, whatever was going on, and
Yeah.
I'd absorb it. And I think kids do this to a certain extent anyway, but I can distinctly remember saying to myself at any time, if my parents are happy, I'm happy. I just wanted everyone to be happy, and would absorb so much. Often highly sensitive people will be the ones who are crying during particularly sentimental commercials. And I mean, I don't watch the news because I find that too painful, really. There's hardly ever anything good on it. And
Right.
I just don't like to put myself in that situation. And so, actually, Elaine Aron, who, like I said, created the term, she realized that she was a highly sensitive person, and then did more research and realized that it was a thing. It wasn't just her being totally random and strange, and it is validating. But she's written a book, the original book, The Highly Sensitive Person, which is
Mhm.
brilliant, and I highly recommend that if you do think that you are, because it has a quiz in it, and you can find the quiz online as well. But that sort of gives you a real good framework to whether or not you or one of your family members is highly sensitive. And she also wrote a book called The Highly Sensitive Parent. So parenting as a highly sensitive person, because it is quite difficult, and often we're so stuck in perfectionism. That's quite a big part of being highly sensitive, is that we're really quite perfectionistic as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had to create some strategies for yourself.
Yes.
What were some strategies to help you deal with this kind of feeling of overwhelm or overstimulated? What?
Yeah. Well, I think time to ourselves is really important. And that's something me and my husband often tag team. Right now, I'm recording in this little studio we have out the back, which is sort of like our office, our meditation room, our everything room, really. We've got like a sort of library and a big couch there. And that's sort of the parents' room, we'll sort of escape out here. And we sort of tag team a little bit. We do quite a lot of that. So we'll sort of, I'll be on and then he'll be on. And that works quite well. And I think just filling your own cup first. I mean, that's really the best way. I always make sure I do a little bit of yoga every morning. I meditate just a little bit. It doesn't even have to be a lot, but I really get myself sorted out with my own self-regulation practices, which so I'm feeling full and regulated, and then I can cope with a lot more. So I think that's really important as a parent, and not to think you're doing anything wrong. We're all just doing the best with whatever we have. I think it's that being a perfectionist as well. We always think, oh, we're not doing it good enough, we should be doing it better. But you just can only do what you can do.
And I can see when you have such a sensitive system,
Mm.
regulating, like you said, regulating yourself is going to be so
Mm.
important
Yeah,
because if you're showing up dysregulated, right?
yeah,
And then you have all this information and input that your body already has a hard time processing.
yeah.
Yeah, you have no more resources to
No.
even, it's almost like you need to recharge your battery, right? You need
Yeah.
to recharge your
Yes.
battery
Yeah.
to then be more grounded. And then, even though you're sensitive to certain things, you'll be able to tolerate them better because you have more
Mm.
resources to do
Yeah.
so. So,
Absolutely.
and I mean, that's for everyone. However,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
people who are super sensitive, your
Mm.
battery probably gets a little drained quicker.
And it goes the same for your children, especially if they're highly sensitive, they have to have really make it mandatory to have alone time every day, just to be pottering around, just doing something by themselves and
Mhm.
setting up these practices, calm environments when possible. And you will notice sometimes you can't avoid these chaotic situations, but if you find that they're getting really ratty or irritated, like in a mall or at a party or some sort of chaotic situation, just try and validate them. And even though we might be getting triggered as well, especially if they're not coping, just really being calm and just try and remove yourselves from the situation, really, and leave early or whatever, because that's what it is. It's just an overwhelm.
So when you look back at yourself as a kid, right, and that you obviously had this the whole time, you just learned
Yeah.
it 2 years ago, or not even as a
Yes.
kid, but even before the 2 year mark, right? Is there one thing that stands out that goes like, oh, wow, I really wish I knew this because I can't believe I was feeling like blank? Is there something that stands out to you?
For me, I always just thought there was something wrong with me. Why am I so sensitive? And especially to emotions, I think for me, like I just absorb everyone's emotions and not understand why and think that I was just this really weird sort of kid and highly anxious. I was actually very
Mm.
anxious and was worried I was going to die and like quite anxious. But I think a part of that is from just not understanding and having that validation of who I was and why I was like that. And that's why I think it's so important to have this sort of knowledge. These days it's so different. There's so much awareness on wellness really and emotional wellness, which is fantastic. But I mean, you're probably not such a different age to me. And I mean, there was none of that as we were growing up. I mean, it was quite a different way of parenting and being taught at schools and things.
And I think you bring up a really good point about anxious and anxiety
Yeah.
because, I mean, I can only imagine, right? That here you are as a little one, or even if 2 years ago, and it's like there's something wrong with me that I'm so sensitive. Of course, you're going to be anxious. It's like
Yeah.
you're trying to fit into boxes that
Yeah.
don't fit you, and
Yes,
that
that's
is going to
exactly it.
create a lot of anxiety. And not only that is other people don't understand what you're
Yeah.
going through because like I don't understand. It's not overwhelming for me. I'm in the same room as you. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can process everything just fine, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, they don't understand that. So then you're like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. Of course that's going to cause a lot of
Mm.
anxiety. But that I
Yeah.
think on anxiety is sometimes caused by a lot of misunderstanding of
Yeah.
what someone's really going through half the time.
Yeah.
So that is a good
Yeah.
point. So, like, yeah, definitely if you're feeling a little anxious or if you're feeling like, I just, what's wrong with me? Yeah, take the quiz for God's sakes. Like,
Yes.
maybe you need, right? Like, maybe you just need to
Absolutely.
figure out, like, to say, now, granted, you still need to work on the things like you did, right?
Yeah.
You added like some yoga, meditation, quiet
Yeah.
time, tag teaming with your husband so that you can refuel yourself, get
Yeah.
out of those, or maybe don't even put yourself into certain
Yeah.
situations like
Yes.
listening to the news all the time. That not only is it heightening anyway right now, but
Yes.
it's also for a highly sensitive person to have it on 24/7.
Yeah.
Really, it's like you're a sponge and you're sucking that information
Yeah.
in. And so
Yeah.
that's also exhausting. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's important to know so that you also know that it's Yeah, it's not you. I mean, it's part of you, but it's
Yes.
not like you. There's a reason for it. And then there's also strategies that you can do.
So, so true. And it's so important. I find that validation. I'm someone who's always learning and growing and wanting to learn more about myself. So I think once you know certain things and not using it as an excuse, but a reason, yeah, and to do something to work with it. But a big part of that, which I believe came with it, especially in childhood, not fitting into those boxes and sort of being pushed, not being understood and pushed, go, what's wrong with you? Go do the sports thing or whatever when that wasn't something you're drawn to, is it has a huge effect on self-worth as well. And that's
Mhm.
been a really underlying thread in my journey, is that whole self-worth issue. And I do think it comes from feeling different and not being quite like the normal, the ideal back in those days in the 80s and things. They want the outgoing, the sporty one, the outgoing
Mhm.
one, not the one who's holding back, because you often can be quite hesitant and holding back as a highly sensitive person. So not fitting into that idea of a happy-go-lucky, extroverted sort of person in school, especially high school, it can have quite a great effect on self-worth. And that's been something I've been working on right through my adulthood, and it's something which is always getting better, I think, for me. But I think it's always going to be something I work on as well.
So I know like your parenting obviously probably very differently now that you know if your
Yes.
kids are highly sensitive and giving them that self-worth and the support and boundaries that they need to help them flourish in life. But looking back, if you knew then what you know now about being highly sensitive, what do you think would have been different for you as an adult?
As an adult, well, to be honest, like when I look at my parenting, I kind of parented like that anyway. Like I've always been quite sensitive to my children, and just seeing how they are and sort of seeing that they were quite sensitive, and I would parent accordingly. And I don't push them because I know how I feel, even though I didn't know in my brain, oh, I'm a highly sensitive person. I knew how
Totally.
I felt, and I didn't want them to experience what I felt. So I think it's more, if you aren't a highly sensitive person, you have a highly sensitive child, where that's more of a thing where you want to be more conscious of how you're parenting them. But I
Mhm.
think it's kind of intuitive as a, if I'm the same. I was recently researching, doing some keyword research for a few different things, and the highest one for a lot of things, for anxiety, people who experience anxiety, but also highly sensitive people, so many Google searches of what's the best job for a highly sensitive person.
Mm.
What's the best job if you have an generalized anxiety and things? Because it's very difficult. It's the way our society structures these workplace sort of norms is very difficult for people who are a
Yeah.
little bit different in that way. So luckily now, working remotely is a thing, and there are ways to work around it. But yeah, it's then again, you sort of think, oh, I'm different. I can't cope with a full-time job or something. You think, oh, there's something wrong with you, and it's that sort of self-worth thing again. Whereas it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, normalizing that. No, that's a lot for a lot of people
Yeah.
to yeah.
First of all, I want to put out there this back to back thing, that's not a good thing for anyone anyway.
No,
Like, there's
no.
no bathroom time, there's no
Yep,
nothing.
yes.
So, yeah, back to back does not work, and you can't give your whole self. And I think, like, for me, actually, now that I have my own private practice and I'm my own boss,
Yay.
I keep 30 minutes in between clients. 30
Yes.
minutes. It gives me time to
Good.
write my notes. It gives me time
Mhm.
to pee, have a
Yep.
sip of water, and then fully be present for my next person who walks in
Yeah.
the door. So it's a lot. Maybe I don't need that much, but that feels good to me. And
Mhm.
I don't feel like I'm rushing. I love going to work. I feel fulfilled, and I come home and I'm not drained. And yeah, when I worked in the hospital setting, man, back to back.
Yeah.
If you got to go to the bathroom, people, it was like a day off. It was terrible. Or
Oh,
lunch. We did get lunchtime, but you'd be like catching up on work. It was ridiculous.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I don't think
No.
that's a healthy way anyway, but I am curious. What is like the number one top jobs for a highly sensitive person that you Googled?
I I didn't get them. I did this was the thing about it. It came up as the highest Google, but very easy to rank for because there weren't really any answers. There weren't really any blogs telling what the answer was.
Yeah.
So and even I don't know. I mean, for me, it's working for myself and a bit like you, so that you can set your own schedule. So I don't think there's any jobs like formal jobs, which are the best thing. But if you have your own business, or maybe if you're a tradesperson or something like that, you can take your
Mhm.
dog along to all the different jobs and, listen to music as you go. It's something like that. I mean, something like
Yeah.
that
Sounds like
I
something
think
you
is
can make your
great.
own schedule with, right? Like
Yeah,
something a little bit
absolutely.
more. Now, I do believe that everything has a superpower. With a weakness, there's always a strength. And I don't even think it's a weakness, but what do you think is the superpower of being highly sensitive?
I think sensitivity really is a superpower. And the same things which might be strikes against it, whereas you're really absorbing other people's emotions and that sort of thing, it can also have the flip side of being a superpower because you really connect with people.
Mm.
Connection's very important, especially to me, but I think so many people who are sensitive having that connection. So you really be there with someone and give a lot. I think that's a really strong having that empathy. And I think as children having that empathy as well, they can really have empathy for a sick
Mm.
animal or their friend who's going through a hard time. I think that's a real great superpower. And for us as well as parents, being able to be there for our children and to sort of understand what they're going through.
I agree. I mean, being someone who can actually feel and connect with others are
Yeah.
is such it's huge.
Yeah.
And that's not something you can really teach somebody either. So for
No.
it to come so naturally and authentically is really is a superpower.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I think, emphasizing that for our children who might be like this saying, oh, why aren't I good at this or that? And just really emphasizing the strengths that they do have, because there are a lot of strengths, but they can be overlooked because they're not always valued so highly, especially in our Western society. Often it's the more outgoing ones and the ones who are more out there who get rewarded, the sports stars and all that sort of thing. Whereas I'm sure highly sensitive people could certainly be a sports star as well, but they have that more hesitation, so they might not put themselves out there so much. They actually did a study in the book, The Highly Sensitive Person book. They talked about a study which was done, I think it was Canada and China, a sort of parallel study about in schools what children valued. What do you like best about this person? And what do you value most in a friend? It was something like that.
Mm.
And in China, it was like thoughtful, kind, caring, and that sort of thing. Whereas it was different in the West, it was more like sort of outgoing and
Mm.
putting yourself out there and being energetic and that sort of thing. So yeah, it is something which is valued differently, I think, in our culture.
Yeah,
So
that's so
yeah.
interesting. Yes.
It's a emphasis on well-being and mindfulness and this sort of thing, which is often in schools nowadays, which is great. I
Yeah.
think it's really helping. Yeah,
I agree. I think schools are doing so much more, right? Because there's
yeah,
things like zones of regulation, which is how you regulate yourself. Like, am I in the red zone? Like, how am I feeling, right? Green
mhm,
zone, am I ready to learn? Like, there's different zones that they're
yeah.
actually teaching the kids, at least here in the
It's
US.
great. Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, in the elementary schools, when my kids were there, it's like they were doing yoga in
wow.
between or meditation. They would have little mats. And this is just public school at the time. So they do have a lot more mindful
Mhm.
opportunities and resets, which for people who need that too. I mean,
Yeah.
we all need that, some more than others, but we all
Yes.
need that. So it's such great things that they're actually putting in to school that you can actually
Yeah.
learn this more body mind connection and
Yeah.
regulation of yourself, which when we were in school, let's face facts, there was none of that, right?
Nothing.
Yes.
No. And I remember, like I say, as quite a highly anxious child, I remember regularly going into freeze state, the fight, flight, freeze. I was regularly going into freeze. I still remember the sensation of just my blood running completely cold and just freezing. I remember doing that in the classroom one time And this is how anxious I'd get. I heard of a fire engine going down the street past the school. And I was like, I froze and went, oh no, I think that maybe that's going to my house and oh, the house is
Mm.
on fire. I mean, how ridiculous, as a sort of 8-year-old kid. But I just would jump to these sort of conclusions. And of course, teachers, I don't know if a teacher now would necessarily pick up on that either, but just maybe picking up on signs that, okay, this is quite a dysregulated child who's sort of going through lots of things and just sort of help a little bit in that way. But yeah, again, there
Yeah.
was no awareness, but
Yeah, I agree. I
it's the
think
time.
teachers are definitely more. I think there's even probably more training on
Yeah.
noticing what kids are thinking and feeling, especially since the pandemic, if nothing else,
Yes.
like being more in tune to not just the education piece, but also the social emotional pieces as well of what kids are going through. I think it's definitely in the system, some schools more than
Yeah.
others, but definitely in the system now. And yeah, I think that's so great for kids and for everybody involved because
Yeah.
these are things I always say probably on the podcast, like why didn't we learn these things in school, right?
Yeah.
But I do think the schools are doing a much better job at treating and teaching like the whole child versus just little parts.
So important, isn't it? When you think of it, knowing yourself and regulating yourself so you can and being ready to learn as well, because it all comes into
Yes.
that as well. You have to be in the right mindset to learn. I probably wouldn't have taken a thing in that freeze, stressed out state. Nothing matters. And that's our bodies, our brains are doing that on purpose. Nothing else matters except staying alive in this moment. And rather than learning your times tables or whatever, which is important as well. But this is life skills. It's really important. So,
Right.
yeah,
And just like you said, you can't learn in a
yeah,
state of a
yeah,
heightened state like that, whether it's
yeah,
freeze or fight or flight. Like
yeah,
that's not a good learning place that you're going to take anything in. So, yeah, you're
yeah.
not learning. So, you might as well take the 5 minutes to
Yes.
breathe, take a breath, like make sure the child's
Mm,
calm. And then that
yeah,
calm state is where the highest learning can occur.
mm,
So,
yeah.
yeah, for all of us, right? Whether it's a new job or in school, it's like that's the key. A calm mind is one that's
Mm.
open to learning for sure. So, what is one thing you'd like to tell the moms today that they can start doing and as soon as they're done with this podcast?
Well, I think if you think you might be a highly sensitive person, yeah, really set up those boundaries so that you fill your own cup first. I think that's the most key thing is really give yourself the time and space to really fill yourself up. And then we can be a lot calmer and more validating to our kids, even if they're not highly sensitive. I mean, it's a lot being a kid and being at school all day and just all the things they're going through. So I think fill your own cup first. I mean, that's always the thing which is said, but it's really so true. So just take that half an hour. But it's so interesting, like we are saying before, that real sort of hustle culture where everything's pushed, pushed, pushed. And especially for mothers, we're sort of expected to be everything to everybody, and sort of earn the full-time income and still have the house spotless, the dinner on the table, be the perfect mum who's always there for our kids. And something has to give. So see what you can let go of so that you can really bring this time for yourself just to regulate. And it doesn't have to be a long time. It's only really half an hour probably that I spend in the morning just with my yoga, meditation, a little bit of journaling, and then I'm done. And it's quite remarkable the difference in me. I'm a much like my kids will know if I haven't meditated, you can tell because I'm just different. I'm just shorter, my temper is a bit more heightened because we need to do that. And that's going to give back to everyone. So I know it's said time and time again, but that's really my key, my
Yeah.
key thing.
And there's a reason why it's said time and time again because it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And recently it's funny because I feel like I similar to you where I will do like a morning routine, which I still have, and I do, and I
Yeah.
meditate and I journal and I walk and I have all my things. But recently I started adding an extra meditation or two during the
Yeah.
day and I make them short. It's like 5, 10 minutes tops. And it also helps refuel me midday because sometimes like my cup is like so like full in the morning, like I'm so excited, I'm full, I did all these things. And then I go start my day, and then it's like, things are taken from my cup
Yeah.
throughout the day. And by the, lunchtime, I'm like,
Yeah.
not feeling as awesome as I did. And so like a quick breathing or
Mm,
a simple meditation, even just like around that lunchtime or later in the
yeah.
afternoon before then I step back into the house to then deal with dinner or whatever. I find that really helpful. It's new to me that I added something new,
Yeah.
and it doesn't, once again, like everyone has 5 or 10 minutes, everyone.
Yes.
Yes, it doesn't have to be
That's
long. It could be a
yeah.
walk around the block during your lunch break. It could be in the bathroom, literally while you're going to the bathroom. If you get to go to the
Yeah.
bathroom, you didn't do back to
Yeah.
back, right?
That's
But it
right.
can even be in the bathroom where you just take
Yeah.
5 to 10 breaths, and
Yeah.
that can be
Yeah.
refueling enough. So yeah, so I would challenge people to do that as well.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I've heard quite a lot actually people saying 2 short meditations a day is really a great thing. I've been reading Michael Singer's book. He has two, The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment, and they've been so useful to me. But he was really talking about don't think of your meditation as having these amazing experiences or doing so much. It's really a practice where you're just sitting there and you're just setting yourself up and to do that regularly, just yeah 2 15 minutes meditations a day, maybe 2 10 minute, 5 minutes,
Yeah.
anything that you've got is going to make so much of a difference. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've been playing with that as well, and it feels great to do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Or in the car when you're picking up your kid,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yes, just
waiting.
take a
Usually
minute.
wait.
Yep.
Yeah. So where can the listeners find you?
They can find me on Instagram. I'm lydiagillman.love to a T, is my handle. And I have a website as well, which is lydia-gillman .com, and I do coaching, so I'm really focused on highly sensitive people, but like you say, a lot of people don't actually realize that they're highly sensitive. So my main sort of offerings at the moment are working, especially with high functioning anxiety, because I know a lot of people experience that. And that's something which you can really recognize. And that might come from being a highly sensitive person or not. But
Mhm.
that's really the work I'm really feeling called to at the moment. So I've got a program which is going to be released soon about working and managing with high functioning anxiety. So on my Instagram or else my website, yeah, more news about that will be coming up soon.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you so much for coming on the show and just discussing your own personal journey with being a highly
yeah,
sensitive person and informing us a little bit more. So hopefully people who are like, that could be me, will go and take that quiz. And
yeah,
maybe we'll have that in the show notes too. So if you can send
yeah,
that to me, yeah,
yeah,
that'd be
definitely.
great.
Yeah, I think it's really worth going through and just seeing because it is quite validating if you discover that that's you. Thank you so much for shining a spotlight on this. I think it's really important. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to this episode. It was so nice of Lydia to share with us her experience as being a highly sensitive person. And if you want to connect with her, just click on the link in the show notes. And if you're interested in taking that test to see if you're a highly sensitive person, those links are also in the show notes for you. And until next week, keep carving out time for yourself and keep putting yourself on top of your to do list.